Greetings. We are about to get started. If you use closed captioning, there should be a small CC in the lower right-hand corner, and there's also a question and answer box that is available for your questions. Please feel free to use it throughout the presentation. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this webinar about the NEH-Mellon Fellowships for Digital Publication Program. I am Megan Brown, a Program Officer in the Division of Research Programs at the National Endowment for the Humanities, or NEH. We're going to use some acronyms. I will try and explain them all. If I miss and don't explain an acronym, please do ask me. I look forward to telling you more about the NEH-Mellon Fellowships for Digital Publication. I'm joined by Madison Hendren, who will be monitoring the question box during my presentation. I will be speaking for about 30 minutes, and then we'll spend the rest of our time answering your questions. Please send questions at any time during or after the presentation. I will read them out loud and answer the ones that Madison cannot answer quickly. This webinar will be recorded and archived. As soon as possible, an updated link will be placed on the NEH-Mellon program webpage. It will also be added to the NEH's YouTube channel. I'll begin by giving an overview of the NEH-Mellon program and what kind of projects are supported. I will discuss eligibility and what is new in this year's round. Using the review criteria for the program, I will highlight some tips and common mistakes. I'll end with some information on submitting the application and what happens after that. As I discuss this grant opportunity, I'm going to mention the Notification of Funding Opportunity, more casually called the Guidelines, a lot. This document can be found on the NEH-Mellon Fellowship webpage, and I recommend reading it thoroughly whether you have applied before or not. The NEH does its grant work through 6 divisions, each focused on a different kind of work or audience. The Division of Research Programs supports the work of scholars, individually or collaboratively, on projects that embody exceptional research, rigorous analysis, and clear writing or communication. The major goal of the NEH-Mellon Fellowships is to support innovative digital interpretations of humanities research. This is an individual award for scholars whose significant humanities projects require digital expression and digital publication. Proposals from all disciplines and fields are welcome. Strong applications make a compelling case for both the humanities content of the project and its digital design. What kind of contribution will your project make to existing research and discourse? Please explain why and how digital means enable or enhance your intellectual argument. For example, will you have text that incorporates multimedia components, existing scholarly publication platforms, visualizations, or flexible reading pathways? So here we have an example from Angela Bennett that is co-concurrences of works within manuscripts that also contain Piers Plowman. Anticipated outcomes for NEH grants, even if they are completed after the fellowship period, must be in digital form. They include, but are not limited to, monographs, peer-reviewed articles, websites, virtual exhibitions, translations with annotations or critical apparatus, digital models or manipulables with interpretive content, or critical editions. The Mellon Fellowship for Digital Publication can be taken up for 6 to 12 months of full-time work. Full-time work means that you must devote 100% of your time during the fellowship to your project, free of teaching or other service obligations. The tenure of the project must be continuous. We accept voluntary drafts of the narrative and work plan sections submitted by February 12th or earlier. I know that's soon. I'll talk about these drafts again in a few minutes. The deadline is April 28th. Notification is in late December. Start dates can be any time between January 1, 2022 and September 1, 2023. There is a 20-month window to start your project. The NEH-Mellon Fellowship Program makes up to 8 awards per year. Based on the average application numbers, that means the funding rate comes to about 12%. Do not let the numbers discourage you. This is a competitive program, but you can't get a grant unless you apply. If you do not get an award the first time around, we encourage you to ask for the panelists' feedback on your application, revise it accordingly, and reapply at the next opportunity. A new set of panelists will review your resubmission and will not know that it has been rejected before. For the NEH, every application is a new application. The Mellon Fellowships are a special opportunity for digital publication that is closely related to our general fellowships program. There are some significant differences, however. The product for a fellowship, the general one, can be a print, digital, or hybrid publication. The applications have different requirements for their format and appendices. Because of the significantly larger number of applications, unfortunately, the fellowship competition does not read drafts. These are separate competitions and you may not apply to both at the same time, so we recommend that you consider carefully which would be a better fit for your project. Do know that the fellowship's opportunity has an earlier deadline. Those are due April 14th. If you'd like to learn more about this opportunity, my colleague Claudia Kinkala will be holding a webinar next Tuesday, February 9th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. The link to her webinar is available on the fellowship's webpage. So what kinds of projects come out of the NEH-Mellon program? Here are a couple recent examples. Elaine Sullivan of UC Santa Cruz recently published Constructing the Sacred, Visibility and Ritual Landscape at the Egyptian Necropolis of Saqqara, published with Stanford University Press. This won the American Historical Association's Roy Rosenzweig Prize for Innovation in Digital History in 2020. We also have websites. Henry B. Lovejoy, the Liberated Africans Project, is a website with a large database and analysis. And forthcoming is still Whitney Tretienne's Cut, Copy, Paste to be published through the Manifold Scholarship Platform at the University of Minnesota Press. This is a partial list of projects and activities the NEH does not fund in this competition. For the full list, do see the guidelines. Among the things we cannot fund are standalone video documentaries or podcasts, standalone databases, digitization projects, and other projects that lack an interpretive argument, research and writing leading to traditional print books, research by students enrolled in a degree program, the preparation or revision of textbooks, curriculum development, or the development of teaching methods or theories, books for children or young adults, inventories of collections, guidebooks, how-to books, and self-help books, among other things. Proposals from all disciplines and fields are welcome. We've had archaeologists, historians, literary scholars, and many more. Also eligible are projects from social sciences and sciences that apply humanities methods. Interpretation. We especially welcome independent scholars and junior scholars. You do not need to be affiliated with or on a tenure-track employment by an institution or organization. All U.S. citizens and foreign nationals who have been living in the U.S. for 3 years preceding the 2021 application deadline are eligible. You do not have to have an advanced degree to apply, but you cannot currently be enrolled in a degree program, with one caveat. For currently enrolled students, if you have satisfied all the requirements for the degree and are only awaiting its conferral, you are eligible, but you must include a letter from the dean of the conferring school or your department chair attesting to your status as of the application deadline, which again is 28 April 2021. First, as an aside, if you applied last year, this will look really familiar, but we are constantly tweaking the application requirements so that we can help people tell the best story about their research. I always recommend reading the new notification of funding opportunity closely. There are a few new aspects here that I want to highlight. The narrative section is limited to 3 pages. This page limit should give you plenty of space to explain both the intellectual work you are doing and its humanities significance, as well as presenting and justifying the digital design of your project. New this year is a move for a separate 1-page work plan. The new work plan, which is now attachment 2, should give you plenty of room for a detailed description of what you're going to do. We recommend breaking it down month by month. NEH staff will read and comment on draft narratives submitted before or by February 12th. Please note that we can only comment on 1 draft per person. Email your draft to fellowships@neh.gov and put NEH-Mellon draft in the subject line. Do feel free to include the work plan in this document for feedback purposes. Applicants generally find NEH staff comments helpful, but you should know that submitting a draft is entirely voluntary. It is not required and does not guarantee a favorable outcome of your submission. Finally, your application must include an appendix of 1 or 2 pages with screenshots, wireframes, charts, or other forms of illustrations that describe the planned structure of your digital publication. Evaluators want to know why digital publication is critical to your project and what functionality you will provide. Editions and translations must also offer a sample with the original text on one page and the new edition translation on a second page, including annotations. As we move to application tips, you should start out by thinking about the timeline of your application from the submission to notification and plan ahead. The federal grant process is long, about 8 months for the NEH-Mellon applications. The first step is not actually on this diagram. You must begin by registering for grants.gov. I recommend that you do so as soon as possible, as it can take a bit of time, and you don't want a technical snafu to delay your submission. Likewise, I recommend that you submit your actual application package a day or so ahead of the deadline, so any last-minute technical glitches do not delay your application. Late submissions will not be evaluated. Submission is by April 28, 2021. Peer review panels meet in June. The NEH's National Council on the Humanities, which meets 3 times a year, will review the staff's funding recommendations in November. The chairman of the endowment makes the final funding decisions shortly thereafter, and notifications to applicants are sent out in late December. Keep these steps and the timeline in mind as you plan and prepare your application. Before you start writing your application, your first step should be to study the criteria that we will give to the reviewers to guide their evaluation of your project. You can find them under E1, Application Review Information, on page 16 to 17 of the guidelines. I highly recommend that you use these criteria to structure and present your project. Starting on page 9 of the guidelines under Attachment 1 Narrative, you will see that each subheading of the narrative and the appendices is keyed to one of the criteria. Make it easy for your reviewers to see how each part of the application speaks to the appropriate criterion. But remember that the criteria can be relevant in more than one section, and that taken together, the parts of the narrative should form a coherent whole. I will go through the individual criteria with some further tips. Writing a grant application is its own genre. It is different from a scholarly essay or article or book prospectus. It needs a bit of strategy. Under the subheading Significance and Contribution, tell your reader in a succinct way what your project is about and why it's important. You should explain what it will contribute to your specific field in a way that a humanities generalist can understand. You should also make clear why digital publication is essential to your project. The application will be more compelling if you can situate the project in a broader context of humanities research and knowledge. So, some hypothetical questions. How will my project change the scholarship? How will we think differently? Step back. Does it tell us anything larger? Press yourself on the broader significance of your work for the humanities. One way to stress your contribution is to describe how your work fits in with other work in your field that has addressed the same subject. A short survey of where the scholarship is helpful. Are you taking research in a new direction? Are you revising a long-held assumption or adding new evidence? In short, what is unique, important, or new about your project, and how will it enhance the scholarship in the field? Generally, peer reviewers find that a well-written, clear application is a predictor of the quality of the planned publication, so writing a good abstract and narrative is important. Remember to stay within the 3-page limit for the narrative and follow the formatting guidance. I recommend avoiding footnotes. Other main components are a 1-page work plan, a 1-page bibliography, a 2-page CV, and the appropriate appendices. Making the font smaller on your CV is not advisable. Limit the content. Follow the guidelines carefully to ensure that your submission is not declared ineligible on any of these grounds. Under the subheading in your narrative called Organization, Concepts, and Methods, articulate specific research questions and explain the methods, concepts, and approaches that you will use to address them. Are you using previously untapped primary sources? Are you proposing an entirely new interpretation of your subject? Are you adapting a methodology from another field? How is the methodology appropriate to the project? We have made the work plan a separate document in this round of funding because of the importance of the application process. What will the NEH award be funding? Provide a detailed work plan in 1-month segments. Be realistic about how much work you can get done during the grant period. Don't overpromise. Be specific and think about what stage your project will be at when the award period starts. Remember that this will be 9 or more months from your application date. State where you are now and project where you will be then. You do not need to complete the entire publication within the grant period, but you should give a reasonable timeline for doing so. If you will be relying on institutional support or other sources to assist with technology-related work, describe this and the roles of the people involved and whether funding for this assistance is in place. You cannot plan to split a single individual award among several collaborators. If you have an equal partner on a project, you should each submit an application. You may also seek funds as an individual who is part of a larger collaborative project, but in both of these cases, whether one collaborator or several collaborators, clearly explain how the work will be divided and the extent to which each collaborator's contribution depends on that of the others. If your project is truly large-scale and collaborative and you need funding for a team, you should consider the NEH's Collaborative Grants Program, which has specific evaluation stream for digital scholarly projects. Applications for the Collaborative Grants Program are due December 1st. Under the subheading in the narrative, Competencies, Skills, and Access, explain how your prior work led to your current project. Emphasize your academic strengths and achievements that are relevant to the present project and give a realistic self-assessment of your experience with digital humanities. Ideally, the scholarship and technical expertise should be balanced equally, but many people are stronger in one area than the other. Be honest and don't exaggerate. NEH-Mellon fellowships want to encourage academics to venture into digital publication and explore its possibilities. Describe what the ultimate digital publication will look like, how it will work and serve intended audiences, and how it will be disseminated. How will it be accessed? What steps are you taking to ensure accessibility by diverse populations? Who will host it? Have you thought about its long-term sustainability? Mention the expected publication date and publisher if you have one lined up. Reviewers usually look favorably on projects that undergo rigorous peer review processes prior to the publication. Do include a URL if one exists. If you do include one, either for a prototype site, a GitHub repository, or something else, make sure that there's actually something there for evaluators to go see when they look at it. We've had blank sites confuse evaluators in the past. I wanted to put some of these important dates in front of you again. When planning your application, remember that the actual start time for your project can be up to 15 months after the submission date. You can have applicants who apply several times before an evaluation is successful. If you do not get an award the first time, we encourage you to ask for the panelists' feedback on your application, revise accordingly, and reapply. It's a growth process, and we often see people successful on their second, third, or fourth tries. And with that, we will now turn to questions. Please type them into the Q&A box and we'll answer as many as I can in the time remaining. Please do email us with any questions I do not get to during the question and answer period, or which you think of right after you hit close on the webinar. We are happy to help. Let's see. I have a question from Sarah Juliet. When we say that these are individual projects, does that mean that the applicant alone has to build the digital project? Can students be involved in building the digital platform? That is the outcome if the applicant does the research? Yes, you can have assistance in building the digital platform, and we often have people who work with digital humanities centers, students, or even colleagues who do some of the technical aspects. The funding can only go to the individual. It is a set amount per month. It is $5,000 per month. And so what we cannot do is say, split the funding between you and a student. Nikki, I got a question that says, could you please clarify this requirement? Standalone databases, documentary films, podcasts, and other projects that lack an explicit interpretive argument are not eligible. I'm interested in using the grant to produce a podcast along with a website that would advance an interpretive argument. That is eligible. So what we're saying here is you could not, for instance, simply do a podcast series, but did not also have the digital website with the interpretive element. So if you have a complex project that has a digital monograph with a podcast and say a database as a unit, that is acceptable. And I see that Madison has also helped you answer that question. Anonymous, the prolific author Anonymous. Can we have a draft read for this award, but choose to apply for the general award instead? You can. However, because the award project, because these are different opportunities, the advice that you get may not be perfectly applicable to both. So if you're wishing to get feedback on the narrative, for example, the fellowships program does not require wireframes or digital publication, and you may in fact do a slight disservice to have as extensive an explanation of the digital publication aspect in fellowships that you would need for the Mellon fellowships. And if that's a complex answer that needs further elucidation, just please shoot me another question. May one candidate apply for 2 fellowships? No. You can only apply for 1 fellowship at a time, so only 1 application to the NEH-Mellon fellowships or 1 application to the fellowships program. You cannot apply twice to either of those programs, and you cannot apply to both of them at the same time. Madison answered the degree conferral question. Hello, Anonymous. Thanks for the information. May I ask if one can, oh, that got answered, so great. Can you be an independent researcher, or do you have to be affiliated with an institution to apply? You do not have to be affiliated with an institution. You absolutely can be an independent researcher. If you are registered in grants.gov for your role for an organization, are you also able to register as an individual? And Madison's answering that right as we speak, so I'll let Madison take that one. For the 3 years requirement for foreign nationals, does it have to be contiguous 3 years? Yes. Permanent residents, likewise, if you're not a US citizen, you need to be in the United States for 3 years preceding the April 28th, 2021 deadline. Hello, this is where we find the recording of this presentation. So this presentation, once it is processed and we clean up the transcription, and I see how many times I have said will be posted to the Mellon Fellowships webpage and will also be posted to the NEH's YouTube channel. I am a humanities scholar and teacher and with computer coding skills. I'm working on a video game to teach philosophy and religious studies. So the key part here that raises a red flag is to teach philosophy and religious studies. In the list of things that we're not allowed to fund with this program, unfortunately, is curriculum development, textbooks, and pedagogical materials. So if your main focus for the project is teaching, I recommend looking at the NEH's education division, where they have several opportunities for developing curricular materials. When you say that a documentary or other cannot be the single outcome, will it negatively influence the application if it is part of the project? Not if it's part of a more complex whole. If it's a supplementary material to a larger interpretive project, it does not hurt you. We've had some quite complex things come through, and it just can't be the only product for this grant. Yes, just to reemphasize, this will be posted. Give us a couple days and we will get this up on the website and on the YouTube channel. Can the funding go toward more training in digital humanities during the award period? Say a workshop on Scalar. So this is a flat rate fellowship. We do not require a budget and you should not submit one. We have no restrictions, I believe, and I can double check this for you. So if we want to make sure about this, please do email me and I will double check my answer before I say something absolute. I do not believe we have any kind of restrictions on, for example, you using this to go get training because it is your stipend and we do not ask for a budget. So whether you use it for housing or materials, whatever, it's up to you. Can you clarify what interpretive element means in terms of your criteria? So an interpretive element means that you need to be advancing an argument about your materials that you're presenting in your digital format. So for example, if your project was to create digital editions of Tennessee Williams plays, you would need to have a scholarly apparatus that elucidated words, that provided contextual essays, a biography, that kind of thing. If your project was to create an online exhibition of materials related to early 1990s video games, you would need scholarly essays, contextual information about the period, some sort of intellectual context that wraps around it. You couldn't just, for instance, put up an emulator of Oregon Trail, as amazing as that would be. That answers that question. What level of interpretation are we looking for? Our project is map-based architectural database that certainly discusses the structures, but contains no theoretical arguments per se. So you would need a bit of a theoretical argument there. If your explanations of the architectural structures are factual, it gets to be a fine line there, but you need to have an interpretation of the material. You can't just be digitizing and presenting that material. If your primary thrust is a digitization project, there are other programs at the NEH that might be more appropriate, such as the Preservation and Access Humanities Humanities Collections and Reference Resources grant. And Madison's got you the link there. Great, thank you. What is the best way to calculate the amount of money requested in the application? So the amount of money is by month. It is $5,000 per month. If you think about how long it will take you to do the amount of work that you need to do, that is how much money it will be. So your minimum is 6 months and your maximum is 12 months. Would a digital edition of a text for which I don't yet have the copyright be eligible? Technically eligible. However, if you have not yet secured copyright, that will be a question raised by panelists who will, it would be a big question for evaluators who might be reluctant to give funding for something that you then would not have the right to publish. I would highly recommend securing copyright before you apply. Hi, John. A U.S. citizen living in Germany, would you have to be located in the U.S.? No, you do not have to be located in the U.S. You can take up this fellowship in Germany as long as you are a U.S. citizen, and you can remain there for the 6 to 12 months for the fellowship. Rebecca, if the person applying is taking a leave of absence from a degree program, would that be acceptable? Shoot us an email, Rebecca, and I will double check my answer on that. I do not believe so, but I would like to ask one of my colleagues who has done these permutations more than I have. How important is it to have a book contract with a peer-reviewed publication company or university press? Many of our applicants do not have a book contract at the time of application. It definitely helps. It gives evaluators a definite sense that your book has been examined by experts, and they see that as a very positive thing. It is not a deal breaker, however. Many of the items that are published as part of this program do not go through university presses at all. We've had people have websites, digital games, digital downloaded manipulables, VR experiences that are not the kinds of things university websites publish. So it is not a requirement by any means. That's I know that the NEH has a more perfect union as a theme. Do projects submitted for this fellowship need to engage with that theme? You do not need to engage with the more perfect union theme. For those of you who don't know, a more perfect union is a theme in recognition of the upcoming 250th anniversary of our founding, and which promotes examinations of the varied cultural life in America. There's an explanation of it on the NEH website. If you are relevant to that, it's great, and if you're not, it's not a problem. Okay, so some of these are going to private reply. Sorry about that, Janet. I cannot see the typed responses to all the questions. Can you please answer live about registering as an independent if one is also affiliated with an institution? So if you, was this the grants.gov question? Because if you do need to register as an independent on grants.gov to apply as an individual. If you're a grants officer, you don't want to say apply on that account to your individual grant. If that was a question about whether you can be an individual independent of an institution, you can absolutely be an independent scholar and apply to this opportunity. L, hi, would a digital edition for a text, which okay. I might have already answered this, but just in case, if you do not have the copyright, technically you are eligible to apply, but I would very much recommend getting the copyright before you apply to this grant, as that will be something that evaluators find questionable. Anonymous, would you talk more about the panelist selection process? How many external reviewers for each application? Will reviewers be selected based on content expertise or on technical expertise, or if both, who will that play out in the review panel membership? Okay, so this opportunity actually has a large panel. We use 5 peer reviewers for every panel. And that's actually more than most of our panels here at the NEH. And we do aim for a mix of content specialists, technical specialists, and varied technical specialists. Because of the number of applications we get and the number of panelists, you will have your application read by someone who is not in your field, I guarantee it. It's really important to have your application speak to generalists. We also have usually quite a diversity of technologies represented. So you might have something being read by someone who, like, if you're a map project and you're doing lots of GIS, you may have someone reading your application who's an expert in textual encoding. So it's just something to think about as you're writing your application. You want to explain any acronyms, you want to explain any sort of technical words, whether that's an academic technical word or a technology technical word. Making your application legible to generalists is incredibly important. What is the timeline turnaround for feedback on the drafts? We will go as fast as humanly possible. I will be responding to them as well as some of my colleagues, depending on how many of you guys send them in. So we will try and get you those drafts back in a speedy manner. The draft deadline is quite soon. It's the 12th of February. So that said, we will try and get them back within a few weeks, and that still gives you plenty of time before the April deadline. Can a candidate use the money to pay out the courses that as a professor is scheduled to teach to be able to work full-time on the project? Yes. So the stipend can be used in however manner you need to get time off. For research expenses, it's completely up to you. We do require that you work on this full time. So it cannot, for example, teach a class while working on the stipend. I will need to use part of money for a DH center service. How and where should I include that in the application? So that would be under methods and access, I believe. So if you look in the notification of funding opportunity, there's a section where we ask that you explain any people you are collaborating with, and this would be a form of collaboration. Working with a DH center would be a technical assist. So we ask that you explain any sort of collaborative assistance that you're getting and how that will factor into the work that you are doing. I believe I have
Megan,
caught up. Yes.
There are some additional questions that I published for you to answer as well.
Great. Thank you. Can you apply for the Digital Publication Fellowship and the NEH Fellowship with two different projects? No. You may not apply for the NEH-Mellon Fellowships for Digital Publication and the NEH Fellowships program concurrently. So it doesn't matter that they are two different projects. In one grant cycle, because they both go to the same NEH council, you can't apply to both programs concurrently. Should submissions be funneled through our institutions and therefore subject to indirects or submitted by us personally? That is a question I might ask you to send me an email, because I believe that even if you submit the application personally, it may still be subject to indirects from your institution, but I want to get confirmation on that from one of my colleagues before I give you a concrete answer about that. If you send a draft on February 12th, when can we expect feedback by? I will try and get you that feedback within a few weeks. Will a copy of these slides be made available to audience members? Yes, absolutely. They will be posted to the website in the next few days. How do these grants relate to the NEH's DAG program, with the DHAG, or Digital Humanities Advancement Grants, acronyms? Is there an emphasis on technology and technological innovation in the NEH-Mellon program, or are the NEH-Mellon projects focused on the humanities content and the scholarship? So the answer to that question is that the NEH-Mellon fellowships are focused on the humanities content and the scholarship. The only difference is the presentation mode, as you asked. We are looking for projects that cannot be adequately explained and fulfilled and reach their full potential in print format. So the digital aspect is important. However, we are not focused on the innovation and the technology the way that the DAG is. The Office of Digital Humanities Advancement Grants are focused on fostering innovative platforms, tools, and programs that make the digital humanities possible. And we are focused on the research that would then make use of those. If you happen to also innovate in a platform, program, or tool, that's a bonus. How important is it to have a publisher lined up before the application submission? It is not essential. It does speak well of your project. However, it is not something that we require as you go into this. Can you be an independent researcher, or do you have to be affiliated with an institution to apply? Independent researchers are A-OK. Please do apply. The most active scholar on the subject of my project is a foreign scholar working in a foreign institution. Would you recommend requesting a recommendation letter from a scholar in the US-based institution, or is it permissive to ask a foreign scholar? It is absolutely okay to have a foreign scholar write you one of your letters of recommendation. There is great work being done all over the world in digital humanities, and we recognize that. We are also aware of different letter writing styles that vary quite widely culturally between some places, and we take that into account. You should be aware that sometimes that creates delays in timelines. So just if you were going to ask someone, particularly someone prestigious, we recommend asking early. We also just note that it's more important to have a letter writer who is familiar with your project and can speak to your qualifications than to have the most prestigious name possible. Sometimes extremely prestigious letter writers get asked to write many letters and are not as equipped to write you in particular a great letter as someone who may be slightly less prestigious but knows you better. If you are having a letter written from someone who is non-English speaking, we do ask for a translation in English. Although we have quite a few language capabilities on our team. That may not be true of all of your evaluators who will see the letters. And is that it? Do we have any new ones, Madison?
Yes, we have a follow-up question about the copyright question that was asked earlier.
Okay.
Do you want me to read it to you? I'm happy to
yes,
do that.
Yes, please, because I don't know where it is.
Yeah, she says, thanks for answering my question about the copyright. I wonder if you could elaborate more, i.e. would I still need the copyright if I wouldn't be including the entirety of the text in the digital edition / interpretation?
Unless your use of the text fits within the U.S. copyright's fair use definition, and in which case I would really recommend explaining how it does. The problem may arise that evaluators worry that you cannot conduct the research as described without the copyright. And since it is not guaranteed that you would get the copyright, that would mean there would be a question of what the NEH would be funding. I hope that helps.
And we've gotten another one. I am a professor, but I do not want to apply through my institution. Can I apply independently, or do I have to go through an alternative 501c3?
You do not have to go through a 501c3 at all, since you can apply to this as an independent scholar. However, I am not entirely sure that if you are affiliated with an institution, that is an option. And I would like to have you email me, and I will verify that with one of our program administrators who has more familiar with that part of the grants.gov process than I am at the moment. I don't want to accidentally tell you the wrong thing.
Are you ready for another, Megan?
Yes.
Okay. Would it be relevant to have a bilingual project so it can reach a broader audience?
We are always keen on bilingual projects. We've had a couple really neat ones in the past, and I'm interested in seeing more.
Should the letter of recommendations come from people in the digital humanities?
It can help if writing the letter of recommendation can speak to the technical as well as the intellectual aspects of the project. However, that is not a requirement. You can have someone write letters who's just if you're doing a digital edition of a medieval mystery play, having an expert on medieval mystery plays is a great letter of recommendation.
If I do not know scholars in the field for recommendation, what is your suggestion?
So you want to letters that can speak to the criteria that are listed in the notification of funding opportunity. And those letters can speak to your capabilities as an interpreter of the humanities, the quality of the project itself. You want to find someone who can speak to your ability to complete the project in an effective and timely manner. So people you have worked with in the past are good, so colleagues, former coworkers, people who know you as a scholar, if you have been on panels before. If you are right out of your dissertation or final degree, an instructor can write you a letter of recommendation. If you're more than a few years out from the dissertation, we recommend maybe not having your dissertation advisor write it, because sometimes that raises questions. However, the key here is to find people who know you and your work and can speak highly of them.
All right, so we're getting a couple more questions about applying with an affiliation versus as an independent scholar. So I just real quick, Megan, will point out that all applications to this program must be done by the individual. This is not an institutional grant. So any application to this program is submitted by the individual, not the institution. So I'm afraid there might be some confusion about that. The question about the affiliation, if I'm not mistaken, there's you will select your affiliation when you fill out the application.
There may also be a confusion about the budget. There is no budget application for this, so there is no overhead. There is no opportunity to charge the NEH overhead. This is a flat payment to the individual of $5,000 a month. So I think that might allay a little bit of the concern there. Hopefully.
Here's another question is, can the project be an interactive critical edition of a book written in a foreign language?
Yes. It can be. You will want to speak to the audience that it will that will be able to access it. And one of the things to consider there is, what language will the critical apparatus be in? Will it be in the language of the edition? Will it be in the language of the edition and English? If there is no translation at all, you may want to explain the audience impact a bit, and that is perfectly fine. We have had people propose that kind of edition before.
Okay, when there are two authors, but only one is applying to the fellowship, does the other one need to submit any letters or contribute in any way to the application?
Technically, no. However, the author who is applying does need to explain how their collaborative role fits in with the project, how much work is being done by their fellow collaborator, and where the balance of work is.
Would the fellowship consider to fund a translation of a project to make it bilingual?
Translations are an acceptable outcome. You will still need to have an explanation of the scholarly apparatus that is being added to the translation.
What proportion of first-time applicants are funded on the first try? What proportion of the rest are ever funded on a subsequent attempt?
I don't have that figure in front of me, but if you would email me, I will actually be able to rustle that up for you.
Here's a clarification on a previous question. If the project requires to hire a professional translator to make the project bilingual, would it be acceptable to include the fees in the application?
So there is no budget involved in this application. It is a flat $5,000 a month to the fellowship awardee. And if you use that money for a translator, that is completely up to you. If your work is a larger scale and more collaborative, you may consider one of our other programs such as the Scholarly Editions and Translations program.
Is a book necessary to apply for this fellowship? Can it be a project regarding a website?
Yes, a website is perfectly acceptable outcome of this program.
I read that the letters of recommendation should come from outside my institution. The project is focused on local history and it is indirectly related to my institution. Could one letter come from someone outside my department but within my school, since they can speak to the relevance of the project?
Absolutely. That would be very acceptable.
Okay, another question about affiliation. I am affiliated with an institution, but will not be at the time of the award. Should I apply as an independent scholar?
At the time of application, you should designate your affiliation as it is at the time of the application. If you are term limited, you can indicate that in your curriculum vitae. So I would recommend just making a note in your CV.
If my subject matter pertains to the lives of scientists, is the topic still eligible for an NEH grant?
If you're using humanities methodology, such as biography, to discuss the lives of these scientists, then it is absolutely eligible and cool.
Okay, I think we've gotten through all the questions. So we can, if you have any questions, please submit them now.
And if you think of a question right after we close this window, by all means, fellowships@neh.gov is our email address. Feel free to shoot us an email, and we will be posting this video and Q&A to the website in the next few days.
We've gotten a couple more questions. How long should the recommendation letters be? Is there a template or word limit?
There is not a template or word limit. They tend to be about 2 pages long. I have seen much shorter and I have seen slightly longer, but about 2 pages is generally what people send us.
If you create a website, does the site need a specific date of publication or can it be continually updated?
Continually updated sounds great to us. That is a lot of commitment though. You do not need a specific date of publication. We do not even ask that you publish it during your fellowship period, but we do ask that you give us a timeline of when it would be completed, at least the majority of functionality.
Another question about when, if people submit a draft by the 12th, when they can expect feedback.
So I will attempt to get you feedback within a few weeks of submission, and I would say no more than a month tops.
If we are not sorry, Megan.
No, it's fine.
If we are not affiliated with a university, then what kind of letter of recommendation would be most helpful?
Whether you are affiliated with a university or not, the letter of recommendation advice is actually the same. You want to find a letter writer who will attest to your abilities as an interpreter of the humanities and your ability to successfully complete the project as described. It helps that if your letter writer knows details about the project and can address them specifically in the letter. We do recommend sharing your application materials with your letter writers and making sure that they're familiar with the project they are writing about.
One question is a letter of recommendation a deal breaker?
We have had applications that do not have letters of recommendation. They often do not fare as well as those that do. It does not render your application ineligible. However, it does not help it.
All right, I think those are all the questions.
Great. Well, thank you for coming, and I look forward to seeing some drafts.